Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Human Rights Foundation's Dissidents and Dictators podcast. I'm Alicia Maldonado, one of your co-hosts, and sitting across from me is my lovely teammate, Casey Michelle. Say hi, Casey.
Hi.
Our faithful producer, Omar, is here too. Hiya. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for asking. This week on the pod, we'll be talking about how for years one foreign dictatorship has overseen an unprecedented interference effort aimed at the heart of the U.S. political process, unleashing squadrons of lobbyists while launching illicit campaigns that reach directly into the highest ranks of the American government. Stay tuned. Today we're going to talk about a new report from the Human Rights Foundation. It's called Infiltrating America, how the United Arab Emirates launched an unprecedented political interference campaign in the United States. And it was authored by none other than yours truly, Casey Michelle.
Well, yeah, that's me. I'm the author of this new report, which is now available online on HRF's website. We'll share a link in the show notes as well. And Alicia, I'm very happy to be talking about this report. It was a labor of love.
Yes.
Just as I presume so many of these different tendrils of the United Arab Emirates campaign targeting the American political establishment, targeting American policymaking, were also clear labors of love for the Emirati regime.
That's right. And it's a report that fits right into the mission of the program that you run here at HRF, which is the Combating Kleptocracy program. I always want to add the global.
It is a mouthful, just like Dissidents and Dictators, also a mouthful.
It really is. So it'll be a good trick for us, But so your program is, designed to highlight the link between every modern dictatorship, which is corruption, and how they use those illicit finances to undermine democracy, prop up authoritarianism. Give us a little bit more.
No, absolutely. When we're talking about kleptocracy, right, I think a lot of folks still have this idea that kleptocracy, which literally means rule of thieves, we're talking about one regime, or we're talking about one dictatorship, or, one government in one country. But in the 21st century, kleptocracy transcends borders, transcends oceans, transcends hemispheres. It's an international system that we're talking about that allows all of these authoritarian, all of these dictatorial regimes to launder gobsmacking amounts of money, hiding it not just in their country, but abroad, in democracy after democracy in the West, around the world, often doing so perfectly legally, hiding their tracks, hiding those funds, and then using that money to not only entrench their regimes back home and also enrich themselves and their inner circles, but also destabilize democracies, degrade democracies, and launch, again, as we're talking about today, these kinds of political interference, political influence campaigns. I know, again, we're going to be talking today about the United Arab Emirates, and we'll talk about why we're focusing on that regime in particular. But again, I want to pull back and just say, when we're talking about kleptocracy, what we're working on here at the Human Rights Foundation in this mouthful of a name, Combating Kleptocracy program, we're talking about all of these different dictatorships that all rely on the same financial secrecy networks and all almost to a T, end up pursuing so many similar tactics, similar strategies of degrading and pushing back against democracy globally.
Yeah, as we like to kind of joke in a way, but, they have a shared playbook, and it's a very dirty and ugly one.
It is.
It's Deflategate.
It is heinous. I do not like looking at it. I feel bad looking at it. I would much rather look at the beauty of the democratic playbook therein. It's
really interesting to, and I'm sure you'll get into it, just how they get away with it.
I think a lot of it, Alish, is that in democracy after democracy over the last few years, certainly over the last few decades, I would argue since the end of the Cold War, a lot of folks in democracies just haven't been paying attention. We had this kind of, this notion of whether it's end of history, this notion of whether it's kind of democratic inevitability, that, look, things will take care of themselves. Free market enterprise, so on and so forth. These things just kind of flow naturally. We don't have to pay attention. We don't have to have anyone at the steering wheel. When it turns out, as we now know, there's nothing inevitable about the spread of democracy whatsoever. You have to work at it day in, day out, and you got to be paying attention, and you got to be looking, whether it's in the side pocket of backpacks where that hidden wallet is.
I not believe it was there.
Or at some of these networks that we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, I think we just, we in the free world, as it were, just get a little complacent.
Complacent, that's a good word. I think a lot of folks were extremely complacent. And look, at the same token, a lot of people got a lot wealthier because of it.
That's
so, the good faith reading, complacency, bad faith, a lot of folks were paid to look the other way.
Yeah. Well, so, with all of these dictatorships in mind that are guilty of this sort of, corruption and deviancy, why the UAE? Why did you decide that they deserved a full report, which was brilliantly done, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Elise. It's again a labor of love. I wouldn't have gotten anywhere near it is without the editors, without the designers. Might be my name attached to it, but it was certainly a team effort. And incredibly proud to be sharing this on Human Rights Foundation's website, as well as in print for those who prefer to read copies in their hands. Again, there's been a lot of focus. There's been a lot of attention paid to foreign influence, foreign interference campaigns over the last few years. And finally, again, we should have been doing this years ago, but it's only in recent memory that policymakers in Washington and London and Brussels and Ottawa, Canberra, elsewhere are finally paying attention to foreign interference and foreign influence campaigns, especially and predominantly from dictatorships. There's been a lot of attention on the Russias, on the Chinas, on the Irans of the world, to a lesser extent, the Turkeys and the Hungaries of the world as well. But there has not been really and truly any attention paid to what I argue is the most successful, is the most wide-reaching, and is in many ways the most well-funded political influence and interference campaign in the United States of America, and that is the United Arab Emirates. And again, we're going to be talking about some of the prongs of this campaign writ large, talking about some of the prongs of these efforts themselves, get into some of the particulars. But more broadly, there had been, even with all the attention to political interference and foreign interference, so little attention paid to the UAE that at the time I felt was right to write this report itself and to bring a kind of cohesive story and examination of this playbook that the UAE has perfected to such remarkable success over the past few years in the United States of America.
And as you mentioned, and you say this in the report, far greater attention is paid to Russia and China, and that's because I think, in part, and you can tell me if you agree, they're much louder. It's much more visible that
Yes.
you can see more visibly the ways that they have their fingers and everything.
They are far less subtle in certain ways than the Emirates. Now, not to say they aren't subtle whatsoever. I mean, again, thinking back to things like Russia's 2016 foreign interference campaign, especially on things like social media. For years, especially Americans had no idea these were secretly Russian operations behind them. I'm thinking most especially of the one that I followed for a long time without even realizing it was Russians, which was targeting Texas secessionists. And I was just following it because of all the grammatical errors I thought were absolutely. Yes, I am in love with Texas shape. And yes, has you visited the Texas? I mean, again, all these basic grammatical errors that eventually came to light, whereas with the UAE, we still have so little attention being paid to it.
So I want to get into like the four takeaways that you mentioned in the report, but kind of going backward into that, you mentioned that the UAE has more expenditures, has more money invested in all of these different places in these democracies, far greater than Russia and China. So how do they get away with it?
Well, especially now that again, the spotlight has been shown on the Russias and the Chinas of the world. I mean, the way that they get away with it is, unfortunately, in so many cases, perfectly legally. So I think we can talk about some of the prongs right here, just some of the highlights.
Yeah, we've got lobbying campaigns.
We have lobbying campaigns.
Infiltration.
We have infiltration. Well, I'll run through them. We have on the one hand a lobbying campaign beyond compare for any other dictatorship in the United States, and this is both legal and illicit unreported lobbying. We have high-level donations, significant donations, millions of dollars, to some of the most elite nonprofit institutes in the United States of America, including most especially think tanks, predominantly based in Washington, as well as universities around the country. And then the third prong is the hiring of former American military officials.
Crafty.
Which is really one where they have spearheaded a brand new playbook and a brand new tactic as it pertains to hiring this former American military officials, not only to advise them, both in the UAE, as well as act as effective mouthpieces in Washington. So we have, again, those three primary ones: lobbying, high-level donations, and then hiring former American military officers.
Gotcha, okay. And the goal is to, as you say, have someone here or in America and whatever other democracy, London, and then back home.
Well, exactly. I mean, again, the UAE is a nation that has never been a democracy, that has no freedom of press, that has no freedom of political opposition, very bare bones rights, right, that we kind of associate with other dictatorships elsewhere. All of those are perfectly real and perfectly true in the UAE itself. I mean, Emirati citizens have no democratic rights that we can speak of. And even beyond that, and again, I know we're talking about the UAE a lot, and the UAE is a close partner of the United States and of many other Western jurisdictions as well, despite the fact that it is this horrific, brutal regime that not only doesn't allow those basic democratic rights, but has been linked to everything from torture camps across the broader Persian Gulf, as well as funding Russian private military companies. Think of things like the Wagner Group, which is, I think a lot of folks are familiar with, the primary Russian militia still in Ukraine. It has been linked to all of these clearly atrocious, in many cases, anti-democratic, anti-American moments, events, relationships, on and on and on and on, that this campaign of political influence and infiltration helps cover up, helps paper over, and helps distract from, so that policymakers and democracies don't do anything about it.
Have you ever been to the Emirates?
I have. I was in Dubai a few years ago for an extended layover. Have you?
Yeah, I was in Abu Dhabi and Dubai last year. I was part of a press junket. And, to your point, I think, how good they are. I was in these high-level meetings and listening, and you're in there and you go, oh, they're really good. And you're for the 30 minutes, 40 minutes that you're in there, you're believing it. And as soon as you step out the door, you go, wait a minute. When you're no longer listening to the really beautiful words that they're saying.
And they are beautiful words. And again, the report itself, and we don't necessarily have to talk today about this broader campaign of whitewashing the image of the regime, and especially the kind of the glitz and the glam of Dubai. I will say I ate at the Shake Shack in the main Dubai mall. It was fine. It did not quite compare to the Shake Shacks we have here in New York. I did not go to the Chuck E. Cheese there.
That's a mistake, I think.
But I think to your point though, Alicia, there has been this years-long campaign to transform the UAE into this, center of luxury lifestyle, of certainly political stability in the region, and then beyond that, partnership with the West, especially the United States of America itself. All the while, again, setting up these torture camps where, and we cite this in the report, those who were held, the AP had a great report about this. I mean, those who were held are not just tortured as we kind of understand it. They were literally grilled alive over an open spit of fire. I mean, this is what the UAE does.
Nobody's talking about that, though.
And again, it doesn't get any attention. It doesn't get broader attention. Wow. To say nothing of the role that the UAE has over the past year or so transformed into this hub of sanctions evasion, of illicit money laundering, to work around democratic efforts to push back against things like Russia or Iran, or again, pick any other dictatorship that you like. It's really transformed into this center, this haven for all scum and villainy, that the world can now come to the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah, they're really building it as a place. You can get to Israel from here. It's a lot of holidaying here. Can you talk about how they do this? How they go about getting into infiltrating some of these systems, some of their tactics for maybe which foreign government officials that they go for, military officers?
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I'll talk about a few of these primary prongs themselves. I mean, I think the thing to, as I talk about some of these details, the thing to remember is so much of this, almost all of this, what they're doing is legal. They are not, in many cases, committing any crimes. They are not working around the American system of law. And again, the report focuses primarily on the United States of America. So look at their lobbying campaigns themselves. And again, the UAE has spent more money at a higher rate on American lobbyists, American PR shops, American consulting groups, American law firms, so on and so forth, at a higher rate than any other dictatorship in the entire world. And if you look at the growth, it's a very clear incline over the past few years of spending more money on more American PR shops, consultancies, law firms, so on and so forth, than they are in previous years. And they are then able to use those lobbyists to go specifically to target American officials, to target American congressional staffers, to target the American policymaking apparatus to push for more pro-UAE policies. Now, they have been caught up a few times in illicit lobbying. And there was one spectacular case a few years ago. Well, there's a few spectacular cases, but one especially where an American individual named George Nader was convicted in the court of law for rerouting Emirati funds into the American political establishment, into American political campaigns. He was effectively a straw man, a cutout, taking Emirati funds on the one hand and then giving them directly to American campaigns on the other hand, injecting Emirati funds not just into lobbying arms, but directly into the American political apparatus itself. That is a big
Dirty.
no-no.
It's dirty.
That is extremely dirty, and there's a reason he was convicted of that as well. That's one thing. Again, legally, they are able to perfectly legally donate as much money as they want to American think tanks, to American universities. I mean, think tanks, again, based predominantly in Washington, are oftentimes at the center of American policymaking. These aren't governmental officials in office, but these are the who's who of the leading policymaking scholars and activists and voices that are, again, taking gobs of money, millions of dollars from the Emiratis, and then it just so happens producing all of this pro-UAE material, whitewashing the regime, putting out policy papers about why the United States of America should continue its partnership with the UAE. In some cases, as we know from leaked emails, allowing Emirati officials to take a direct look at what they are writing, what they are producing, and saying, hey, would you like to edit this? Oh, hey, by the way, would you like to actually write, and we'll put someone else's name on top of this. No one will know it's from you, but we'll say it's...
Letting them ghostwrite.
Exactly. They are ghostwriting. And again, none of this is illegal. And the same goes for universities as well.
I mean, it's brilliant to go for the universities if you really want to affect young minds.
Look, get in
there early.
This is one of the most... a lot of it's dirty, reprehensible. But, we like to think of American universities as these kind of progressive bastions, maybe sometimes a little too progressive. And we don't have to go down that path. But at the same token, America's elite universities, and even those that aren't considered elite, have been taking tens of millions of dollars from the Emiratis.
Are we thinking the big ones?
Over the past year. I'll just run through a few numbers.
Sure.
And again, I should say the only reason we know this is because there is a publicly accessible database on the U.S. Department of Education website. It's linked in the report. You can go to whatever university you want, whatever country you want, to look at donations. We don't know what's in the contracts, but we do know the amounts, and we know the source country, and we know the recipients themselves. So just as a few of them, I have a map right in front of me. So we'll start, Johns Hopkins University, $40 million. Harvard University, nearly $30 million. MIT, over $15 million. Tufts University, $3 million. University of Chicago, $2 million. Go out west, you have UCLA, $500,000. Arizona State, almost $5 million. Oregon State, my home state right there, over $500,000. I mean, these are just a few samplings.
It's not chump change either.
It's not chump change. It certainly makes me question why tuition costs are rising that much further if all this Emirati money is coming in. But there's one example that I did want to pull on, which was New York University, NYU, right here in beautiful New York City, took almost $50 million. Almost $50 million. God, that's a lot of money. And again, all of it linked directly to the regime itself, all effectively dirty money. This is a kleptocratic dictatorship that is tossing tens of millions of dollars at universities. But NYU opened a campus as well in Abu Dhabi. It was a satellite campus. Maybe you've heard about this. Maybe you've seen this, Elise. And look, they say, oh, it's good, it's fine. We're spreading, academic freedom. We are reaching new audiences. We're having a global footprint, so on and so forth. And that's all fine and good. But as reporting afterward came out indicated, that was so far from the truth. Not only was the UAE effectively, by all appearances, monitoring what was being taught at this Abu Dhabi campus, but they were specifically censoring certain academics. We had books being removed from the NYU bookstore. We had academics being blocked from even visiting the UAE itself, having their bags searched, being tailed, so on and so forth, because those individual academics were critical of the regime. Meanwhile, NYU wasn't doing or saying anything about this. These supposedly bastions of academic freedom, progressive thought, so on and so forth. You can see what is being bought by these donations themselves.
And you can see what they care about the most when they take the donations and say nothing.
Cha-ching,
they definitely
absolutely.
don't care about the children or the minds. Have we gotten kind of any response from higher up officials in Washington outside of some of these courts who've, like the case you mentioned earlier, is anyone saying anything about the tendrils that the UAE has in government?
So broadly, publicly, no. And again, that's one thing we're hoping to change with this report, to put this on the radar of policymakers, of even those in the think tank community, maybe perhaps those who've even received UAE funds in the past. No, there has been resounding silence about the Emirati regime's political interference and political influence campaign. So basically no one is talking about this. But, in the conclusion of the report, which hopefully, again, readers will take a look, or listeners will take a read through, there was one article, there was one report from October of 2022, so now over a year ago, in the Washington Post, that revealed that the highest levels of the American policymaking community, the U.S.'s National Intelligence Council, had put together a formal report looking at how one foreign regime in particular had overseen a far broader and far more successful political interference and influence campaign than any other. And it just so happened that it wasn't an enemy, it wasn't an adversary, it wasn't the Russias, the Chinas, the Irans of the world, but it was an American partner. It was the United Arab Emirates. And again, that had all of these prongs we've been talking about. Finally, the highest echelons of the American policymaking community are paying attention to this. Now, this was, again, and I want to give credit where it's due, this was an anomaly. This was so unique for this level of American policymaking to look at an American partner, not quite an ally, but certainly a very close partner, certainly in the region, and put together this comprehensive report for other policymakers. Now, the bad news is that that report itself is not available yet. It has not been publicized. It is not public. We only know what the Washington Post reported about it. But I would like to think that a lot of what's in that report is also what's contained in this report that you can find, again, on the Human Rights Foundation website.
Yeah. And I don't really think that you hear much of, like the Biden administration or whatever, talking much even about that sort of supposed ally,
No, and again, rhetorically, there has not been much.
Yeah.
Even from folks outside government, there really has not been much. We haven't seen any high-level meetings, high-level panel discussions, high-level organizations dedicated to the UAE, which is, again, why I hope this report will stand apart and will spark something, at least conversation, if not realization, about the depths to which the Emiratis have gone in terms of constructing this network.
I hope so, too. What do you think people find most surprising when they read it? Is it that it's actually perfectly legal?
That's a great question. I have been working in this space for so long. I have no idea what's surprising, what's not. Let me back up. For me, and I would imagine for other readers, and Omar, you and I were talking, our wonderful, beautiful producer Omar, who's just off mic here. We're talking about this earlier. For me, the most surprising thing was the success and the breadth with which the Emiratis have gone about hiring former American military officers. And we're talking about hundreds, not just one or two or just a few big names, hundreds of former American military officers.
Who are supposed to be among the most astute.
So the process for this, and again, we know very few details because there is no public disclosure requirement.
Right.
They have to go through an application process with the Department of Defense. DOD has to sign off on them going to work as advisors or full-time employees, so on and so forth, for other regimes. Something like 98% of all Emirati-based applications from American military officers have been approved.
Wow.
So you're basically guaranteed to go, glom on to the Emirati regime. And again, this is the who's who of the American military establishment. There are figures like General Jim Mattis, who was working as an advisor to the Emiratis before he ended up joining the Trump administration as the Secretary of Defense. And the only reason we know about this is not because it was publicly disclosed, but because of investigative journalism that dug up these records. Now, he had disclosed this where he needed to Department of Defense, but the American public had no idea that the Secretary of Defense had just come fresh from working as an advisor for the Emiratis. Oh, and by the way, helping spin their messaging, whitewash their image to audiences. I mean, this is the highest ranks of the American establishment.
It's pretty impressive. Yeah, I think, going over your report and some of the reporting I've done in the past, I think it's just the most mouth-opening is just how successful they are.
Yeah.
And no one's talking about it. Those two things.
And those are kind of related, though, aren't they? I mean, that's Emiratis don't want anyone talking about this.
Yeah.
They're, in the darkness, they can continue to succeed. They can continue to flourish, and they can continue to entrench their own regime and entrench this partnership with the American government for their own benefit.
Yeah, it's good. All right, well, that is our latest report. Hope you'll read it. Infiltrating America, how the United Arab Emirates launched an unprecedented political interference campaign in the United States. Hope you guys will read, share it, check it out.
I also hope that.
Good.
Yes, very much so.
Share it far and
We
wide.
worked for a long time on it. It would be great if you guys could read through.
Labor of love.
Yes. All right, Elise, you have any fun plans coming up this weekend?
I do. Sleeping,
Nice.
reading,
Oh, yes.
watch a movie with some friends.
Absolutely.
Some horror movies,
Yes.
as you do like a grown adult. Yeah, other than that, it's just hopefully it'll be nice. Continue the chill that I really love.
Well, hopefully that horror movie scares the daylights out of you, but Alicia, I gotta tell you,
Well,
there's nothing scarier than foreign dictatorships unleashing these political interference campaigns with none of us knowing anything about it.
it truly is terrifying.
Boy, that's spooky.
It really is.
And on that note, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you same time, same place next week.
See you next week. The Human Rights Foundation is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that promotes and protects human rights globally with a focus on closed societies. We promote freedom where it's most at risk, in countries ruled by authoritarian regimes.